Now, the three positive feedback mechanisms that I'm very, very worried about in terms of climate is the melting polar and glacial ice. And what that means is that snow, which reflects something like 99% of the incident sunlight, turns into black seawater, which absorbs 99% of that sunlight. And so the albedo of the Earth, which is how white, how reflective the Earth is as seen from an observer in space, is decreasing. So melting ice causes a decrease of the albedo of the Earth, warming of the waters, which means that there's more melting of ice, which means that there's more warming of waters, which means that there's more melting of ice. And I'm sure you can understand that once that process starts, it may not actually stop until all of the ice is gone. The second problem is thawing of the Arctic tundra. The Arctic tundra contains between 350 and 450 billion tons of carbon dioxide or methane. Now we, in comparison, produce only about 6 billion tons of greenhouse gases a year. So the positive feedback process is as follows. The Earth gets a little bit warmer, some of that Arctic tundra thaws, that releases greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, makes the Earth a little bit warmer, more Arctic tundra thaws, and you can see that that is yet another positive feedback loop, which might only end when the tundra has all thawed. The final one I'm worried about is the oceans. The oceans currently store about 70% of the carbon dioxide on our planet, and they do so best when they're cold. As the ocean warms, instead of acting as a sink for carbon dioxide, the oceans actually start yielding up carbon dioxide, and you can sort of see that as the oceans warm, they yield more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. That means that the oceans warm further, and yet another positive feedback process. Now, I am frankly terrified about these three positive feedback processes because I don't know if, even if we all as human civilization agree to do everything properly and cooperate to try to minimize our further release of greenhouse gases, I don't actually know if it would actually save us. You can see from this chart the number and violence of storms seems to be increasing. I've extrapolated out to the noughties on the basis of what happened between the years 2000 and 2004. And you can sort of see, now there are two reasons. Obviously, the number of storms is about the same. The violence of the storms is increasing, and the number of people and the value of property in the way of storms is also increasing. All of those things are conspiring to make the number of very, very severe storms increase out of control. This is a diagram of what happened to the price of oil over time. And as you can see, remember that the United States production of oil peaked in 1970. What that specifically meant was that the US, no matter what the provocation, no matter what the desire, were not able to increase their production to control prices. So what happened 2 years later, 2 or 3 years later in 1973, there was the first OPEC protest. OPEC reduced the production of oil by about 5%, and in response the price of oil doubled. Later in 1979 the same thing happened, yet another OPEC protest, yet another doubling in the price of oil, and that meant that it was a disaster. Now, two things happened after that. The Perdo Bay, which is a huge oil field in Alaska, came into production, so did North Sea oil. That meant that OPEC was no longer able to dictate the price of oil, and therefore the price of oil fell for 20 years or so. But as I told you earlier, both Prudhoe Bay and the North Sea oil have peaked, and as you can see, the price of oil is starting to inexorably rise.
What we're facing is the beginning of the decline. And what is so interesting out of that is that from our mindset today, everybody is used to growth. We all live on the expectation of growth. We expect our salaries to rise. We expect everything to grow around us as it has done in the last 50 years. And this growth of the past has been made possible by the cheap energy that has been available. And now we face a change.
When we start the transformation process from where we are and where we've got to go, we will see massive competition between companies as they realise the energy productivity miracle they can embark on, how they can save or use the resources they've got in a more efficient, productive way. A company that embraces that is going to see its share price highly valued. A company that ignores the consequences is going to find that it just simply goes out of business. Its share price will be trashed out of sight, to be quite honest.
Now, I don't know what's going to happen. Jeremy Leggett says that we may see a full-blown depression as a la 1929. Robert Hirsch, the author of the Hirsch Report, said that maybe depression would be the best possible outcome because the worst possible outcome would be World War III. Finally, with famine, drought, floods, crop failures, millions or even billions of refugees, an economic collapse on an epic scale, war seems to me to be inevitable. On a local scale, I worry about anarchy, banditry, invasion, and feeding ourselves.